Under the shadow of an oak, my father recounted how his education allowed him to overcome his circumstances, the cards the universe had blindly dealt him. The aging tree stood between his family's two-bedroom cabin and his dilapidated high school in rural Oregon. It was there that I learned about the bankruptcy of his father's business. It was there that he unearthed the fact that the bank had seized his family's asset and their Portland house, forcing his parents to raise him and his two siblings in Vernonia. It was there that he shared his story of finding a way out. During high school, he worked at a mechanic's garage each afternoon to help support his family. He managed to gain admission to the University of Oregon during his senior year, but the harsh reality was that his family couldn't afford it. In my young mind, the concept of his future hanging in the balance over an issue of money made little sense to me. A few months later, he told me a letter informed him that federal grants and loans would give him the chance to attend and later graduate from college. At the time, I had never questioned the reality that wealth directly determines one's access to education. I had never realized that I owed my literacy to those who came before me. I had internalized my father's experience and became intensely focused on my own education, the only element of my life over which I felt I had true control. My ability to read and write empowered me, but primarily because I was privileged enough to have agency in my school. I benefited from a school system with strong teachers, but only realized how this impacted me later. It wasn't until I arrived at Claremont McKenna College and took an education policy course that I revisited my father's pathway to opportunity. As I continued to learn about our education system's failures, the inextricable link between my father's race and his social mobility became clearer. His access to books later in life dictated my own literacy. I wondered whether the current state of our schools was inevitable or whether we could invent new pathways to opportunity. My journey to answer that question has unfolded over the past 4 years. While in college, I quickly realized that the public sector alone could not create these pathways for our most vulnerable citizens. I interned at the White House Domestic Policy Council, which allowed me to learn the craft of education policy and engage in a service project. For an afternoon each week, I left the halls of the Eisenhower Executive Office Building to guide a student at Woodrow Wilson High School through the college admissions maze. Wilson's counselor paired me with Dama, a senior whose parents had emigrated from Sierra Leone when she was 5. Though she seemed highly verbal at first, she struggled when it came to reading. Dama needed to retake the SAT, so we tackled passages to boost her reading score. Though I tried desperately to teach her how to find the main idea in a text, tutoring her once a week opened my eyes to the many ways in which a system had profoundly failed this girl. Each evening after I tutored Dama, I returned to my office feeling powerless in my inability to change her circumstances. Our traditional system of education had failed Dama and thousands of students before her. Through this experience, I became invested in finding innovative ways to extend social mobility to Dama and her family, for whom public services had largely failed. Though Dama was deprived of an English-rich environment, my parents read to me, provided me with books, and expected me to love literature. My literacy and privilege are intertwined and inseparable. While it's difficult to reflect on one without the other, understanding my literacy in isolation remains difficult. I became most aware of my literacy and my privilege when I moved to Poland. I moved last year to Warsaw, Poland on a Fulbright scholarship to research the European Union's impact on social enterprise. While I applied with the hope of starting Polish language training over the summer, I arrived in the country with no knowledge of the language. My comfort with the Slavic language increased during my orientation, yet I still felt a profound sense of powerlessness. Translating my thoughts from English to Polish was exhausting. Most academics and university-educated citizens spoke English, but I struggled most on the streets and during authentic interactions with Poles. As I peeled back the layers of Polish culture, my literacy improved and I began to understand the language and the people of Poland. I took an intensive language course at the University of Warsaw. My attention began to unwind, specifically when I started to learn more about culinary culture and the language surrounding it. As I explored the Polish cantinas called milk bars, my comfort, understanding, and power seemed to increase. Bar Bambino, my preferred milk bar, typically had a line out the door. Milk bars attract members from across the social classes, retirees, students, and suits. Outfitted entirely in beige, the women who made Bar Bambino run like a well-oiled machine should not be crossed. The lady at the counter would squawk, "Proszę." "Proszę" means many things. In this case, it means next, or please. I would step to the front of the line. I would recite my order in Polish. I would step out of line. In the background, a flock of older women busily prepared Polish dishes like głąbki, a cabbage leaf stuffed with beef and rice and simmered in a silky tomato sauce. Though it seemed trivial, the predictable procedure eased my nerves and allowed me to find some means of knowing, of feeling as though I was part of an in-group or a community. My year in Poland exposed me to times of great solitude, but having part of my literacy stripped away gave me an even greater appreciation for the linguistic power that I maintain in the United States. Poland also struck me because it seemed to offer dignity to those in poverty. I've arrived at the belief that America's ability to provide access to a quality education for all remains bound not by our resources, but by our imagination. As my mind wandered back to the U.S., I could not help but to confront my own shortcomings. I had immersed myself in systems and datasets, but my heart had remained sheltered from those who I had hoped to serve. I wanted to teach to help the most vulnerable segment of our society, children, carve out their own pathways to opportunity, just as my father had a generation ago. For me, the promise of teaching lies in the words that Jamaica Kincaid often told me. Laws cannot make a poet, but a poet can make laws. Each day I hope to empower my own students to play the cards the universe has not so blindly dealt them.